My name is Luke Resop. I'm a Ph.D. student at Mississippi State University working in the deer lab. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I've been slowly migrating my way further south over the years. Started at Penn State doing a little bit of stuff. I was actually studying mechanical engineering there, decided I did not want to do that the rest of my life, and ended up at Virginia Tech, where I finished my undergraduate degree in wildlife conservation, and I knew I wanted to do applied deer habitat management long-term with my career. And Mississippi State Deer Lab is absolutely one of the best places to pursue that type of education for a career in the deer world. So long story short, I ended up here where I did my master's degree studying prescribed fire and how we can use the timing of prescribed fire throughout the year to manipulate the trajectory of plant communities to benefit deer and turkeys for forage and cover. And then I stayed on after my master's, and I'm now working on my PhD, focusing on regenerative versus conventional food plots and how these different management systems, whether it's regenerative focusing on soil health or conventional using, synthetic fertilizers and herbicides, etc., to promote yield and biomass production, how those two kind of contrasting management systems influence the soil, how they influence plants, deer and turkey use of various treatments, how they influence invertebrate abundance, and ultimately economics, and which one of those is best on your pocketbook. So I guess in short, I am a pyromaniac at heart. I love to set the woods on fire, and my passion is really anything applied deer habitat management. So I have a somewhat unconventional route to deer management. Most people you talk to in this field that are deer biologists grew up hunting from the time they were, a little sprout. Their dad and granddad took them out in the woods, and my parents were outdoorsy and we spent a lot of time outside, but I didn't start really hunting, especially deer, until I was out of the house and in college. And so I am very self-taught, and I use that for the excuses why I'm not a very good deer hunter, because I've had to learn it all the hard way through trial and error. And I guess the way I got into applied deer management and the research side of things is I've just always been very fascinated by critters. And as soon as I did my first prescribed burn when I was an undergrad at Virginia Tech, I was absolutely hooked. I mean, it was the coolest thing, not only conducting the burn, but also watching the plant community respond. And then over the next, 6 months to a year, watching the wildlife respond to the plant community response in that burn. So I just became really interested in how we can manipulate plant communities, whether it's an old field or a timber stand or a food plot or whatever it is, and how we can manipulate those for the benefit of whatever critter we're interested in. Obviously, we focus a lot on whitetail deer and wild turkey, but the options are endless. And I think the science of it is really fun, and that's why I'm pursuing my PhD, but I also think the art of habitat management is probably what's the most fulfilling. So when I walk onto a property and I'm evaluating the potential of that property to support white-tailed deer, the main thing I'm looking for is not necessarily what the property is doing really well. I think that's what a lot of, that's an easy initial response, but my go-to, where my eyeballs initially go, is what is the limiting factor. So, you could have, let's take, central Mississippi, for example, or much of the deep south. Cover is not generally going to be a limiting factor on a lot of properties in the deep south. You're generally going to have pretty decent cover, but oftentimes food availability is going to be very limiting. And that's going to vary by time of year. Forage availability from spring green up, so March through June oftentimes is not going to be limiting. But then when you get to this time of year, we're mid-September right now, oftentimes there's still a lot of green stuff, but the nutritional quality of that food has now become very limiting. So it takes a trained eyeball to look at the landscape composition and see what is likely most limiting from a deer nutritional perspective, or even a huntability perspective. Like if we're managing a property as a hunting tract, then it's not just about, where food is located and where cover is located, but it's also the arrangement of those features and how we can access them.